this point. This training is the 12th webinar in the I-STARR training series. This is a training that is geared toward all audiences. And the I-STARR project is supported by a grant from the National Institute on Drug Abuse. It is part of the larger NIH Helping to End Addiction Long-Term or HEAL initiative, and is one of the several projects that comprise a consortium on addiction recovery science, or the CEUs network. So again, I'm Diane Schmidt, and I'm the communication specialist at ARG. And Amy hopefully will be joining us soon. She's the MPI on the project. In addition to myself, there are a number of others involved in this project. The I-STARR project is co-led by Doctors Amy Miracle in the Alcohol Research Group at the Public Health Institute and Carmen Masson at the University of California, San Francisco. This team also includes co-investigators Sarah Zemore and Lenny Jason, biostatisticians Meena Subbaramam and Libo Lee, and communication specialists Diane Schmidt, as I introduced myself, and Dustin Kepzu. And then we have Quinoja Kapitani is the I-STARR project coordinator. And I believe that Amy is back on board. Amy, do you want to take over?
Sure. I'm so sorry, folks. I can't believe that Zoom decided to implode and I had to restart and my computer was downloading software and blah, blah, blah. Here I am. Thank you, Diane, for holding down the fort. Welcome, everyone. In addition to our I-STARR team, which is fabulous, we also have an advisory board. It's a 17-member advisory board. It's comprised of leaders from across the country. We have recovery and recovery housing leaders. We have treatment providers and payers. We have national policy advocates. And we also have other folks like me, researchers and educators. So that's a little bit about the I-STARR project. Let's go to the next slide. We want to hear a little bit about who we have in our audience today. We do have some polling questions, just 3 questions, and it's just to get a better sense of who we have in the room here today. So the first question is, what best describes your profession or role as it pertains to recovery housing? The second question is, have you attended a prior I-STARR webinar? And the third one, which type of I-STARR webinar have you attended? And if we can launch the poll now, we'll let people have a chance to answer those questions. And then once we have about 75 or 80% of folks responding, then we'll share the polling results. Have we launched the poll yet? I'm not seeing it on my end.
Having some technical difficulty again.
Oh my gosh, Zoom is just going crazy on everyone.
So let me try it one more time. And unfortunately, if not, we might have to ask everyone to submit your answers in the chat. And that is. Unfortunately, I'm unable to do it. That should mean.
Dustin will continue to work behind the scenes, but I like the idea of people responding in the chat, the answers to those questions. Just scrolling through. So we have some operators and providers. Excellent. It looks at researchers as well. Another provider, recovery housing manager. Dustin, have we given up the hope of the poll?
Yes, unfortunately, I'm not sure what is going on with Zoom today. It is not allowing us to launch. So our apologies, everyone. And thanks so much to everyone for putting your answers in the chat. It's really helpful.
Excellent. So we have some more researchers here in the audience. Oh, wow. We have someone who's attended all past I-STARR webinars. Someone who's, this is their first webinar, so a good mix of folks. Wow, this is the last, someone who's attended all of them except for this one, the last one. Excellent. Well, feel free to continue to drop things into the chat. In the interest of time, because we got off to a late start, why don't we just kind of keep plowing through. What we want to do in this webinar series is kind of have a more kind of discussion-oriented kind of webinar, departing slightly from the past where it's been really topic-oriented. Before we get into that discussion, I thought it might be good, since this is the last webinar in the training series for both tracks, the operators and the providers, as well as the researcher track, that we just do a brief recap of kind of what we wanted to do with the I-STARR training series. So let's go to the next slide. So just by way of background, we hope to impart in the first webinar of the training series, which was also an all-audience webinar like this one, is that the evidence base for recovery housing is generally strong, with most studies highlighting improved substance use and associated outcomes like improved mental health and lower involvement in the criminal legal system. Despite these good outcomes, there are gaps that remain in the recovery housing literature, particularly regarding recovery housing for key subgroups of residents and findings that can point to evidence-based practices in recovery housing. And this is particularly true for folks who are taking MOUD and operators and recovery housing providers who are trying their best to support these residents. Indeed, some of the work that's been done in this area has highlighted potential barriers to recovery housing for folks taking MOUD who actually might need it more than other residents. So this training series was really designed to address these gaps. So the training series for operators and providers was led by recovery housing experts, namely representatives from NAR, the National Alliance for Recovery Residences, as well as by Jason Howell from Recovery People. The researcher training series focused on common challenges in conducting recovery housing research. And in addition to having experts on research methods as presenters, highlighted work from researchers who overcame these challenges in their recovery housing research. So webinars in each track were about an hour in length and allotted time for questions and discussion, contained resources, and we wanted to make sure that folks always had a way to track where they can find or take a deeper dive with information on that topic. So actually, let's go back to the prior slide. We did put a lot of thought into the most critical topics to cover for both tracks because we wanted to make sure that we covered as much as we could in the series. That said, recognizing that 12 webinars represented a significant time commitment, we also wanted to make sure that we recognize individuals who did expend this effort. So as such, we wanted to offer folks who registered and completed each webinar in their training tracker certificate of completion and an opportunity to be recognized on the I-STARR website. Further, we became a NADAC approved education provider so that folks who completed the operator provider webinar training series could have the completion of their training series count towards 12 NADAC CEUs. Again, with the operator provider series, let's go to the next slide. We wanted to make sure that we covered basic recovery housing operations. That was the first 4 webinars in the series. The next 4 webinars were specific to supporting residents on MOUD and recovery housing. And the webinar that we did last month, we were hoping to get operators excited about collaborating with researchers. We had researchers present everything that operators might want to know about participating in or collaborating with researchers in conducting recovery housing research. Let's go to the next slide. So for the researcher training series, this was really geared towards folks who are beginning to conduct recovery housing research. So webinars in this series included topics on study design, sampling and recruitment, sample retention and longitudinal studies, qualitative and mixed methods, data collection strategies, measurement of critical constructs. And the last webinars were really nerdy and talked about statistical techniques. And the webinar that we just did last month, we were hoping to prepare researchers for collaborating with recovery residence operators. So last month we featured recovery housing operators talking about everything that their work entails. And again, we were hoping that folks would attend all of the trainings in this research or in this series, either the researcher or the provider series. But we knew that it would be a lot of time. And as we have today, we have folks that are just coming to the training series. So to make sure that people could get every single webinar in the training series, we built a learning management system. And I'm now going to turn things over to Dustin Kebzu, who will talk about our learning management system.
Thanks so much, Amy. So we developed and launched a 12-lesson online course that coincides with the I-STARR webinars, which is accessible through our learning management system. If you're interested, you can enroll as a student in one of our 2 different training tracks, either researchers or operators and providers. Both tracks have been tailored into a course, which is comprised into 12 user-friendly lessons that are designed to complement and expand upon the content covered in the live webinars. Each lesson contains a recording of the live webinar, plus supplementary material and tools, a discussion forum, interactive video components, the ability to communicate directly with the I-STARR team members, and knowledge checks to test your skills learning. Next slide, please. Main advantages of the online training course is the flexibility of the platform. The asynchronous learning environment allows users the ability to access the course really anytime, anywhere, just as long as you have an internet connection. Using the LMS, we can also offer credit to those who enrolled in the live training series but were unable to attend any of the webinars. If you happen to fall into this category and are interested in gaining credit for any of the missed webinars you might have been able to attend, you just need to email us at istarr@arg.org with your name and the webinar or webinars that you missed. We'll then send you a link to the corresponding lesson or lessons which you can complete at your own convenience. Next slide, please. So upon completing the training series, similar to what Amy mentioned earlier, all those will receive a certificate of completion, and they will have the option to be professionally recognized on the I-STARR website as a graduate of the training series. Providers are also able to earn 12 NADAC CEUs, and you can visit our website to learn more about earning CEUs or just send us an email with any questions you might have. Next slide, please. So next, I'm going to share my screen, do a very quick overview of the LMS, and demonstrate how to enroll and navigate through the 2 courses. So here you can see the LMS landing page. This is accessible in the training section on the website. I'm going to choose the operator and providing track for this demonstration. As you can see, it is broken down into 12 different lessons. For those that are new to the course, you just need to select the Take the Course button at the top of the page to enroll. It's then going to bring you to a new window, which gives you the choice to either register as a new student or log in if you're a returning user. Currently, it doesn't appear on my screen because I've already enrolled in the course. For today's example, I'm going to navigate to the recovery environment and recovery supports lesson from last summer. And as you can see, the lesson begins with a recording of the full live webinar. And I want to point out that in order to gain credit and complete the lesson, you need to make sure that you watch the entire video. If you don't watch the full video, you're going to be unable to complete the lesson and take the evaluation. Next up, we have the supplementary material selection. You can find a range of journal articles and other resources on the topic covered, which were carefully selected by the presenter and the I-STARR project teams. And then you can see the quiz. This is just a brief overview of the information covered for a knowledge check, as well as feedback about the lesson, so we can kind of make sure we're understanding your needs and what's working and what's not working about each of the webinar. And we also at the bottom, which you can see down here. At the bottom of each lesson, we have the option to post comments. We hope this will engender collaborative learning by encouraging knowledge sharing, provide a nice space for feedback, and a place where people can dialogue with each other about the lesson. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jason, who's going to speak about what's coming up next in the webinar series. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dustin. I'm Lenny Jason, and happy to tell you that there's going to be an exciting next chapters in the I-STARR webinar series. For example, there's going to be a session coming up, you'll learn more about it, on the Oxford House model, which is a self-run, self-help kind of model of residence and services. There'll be several on emergent findings and topics. So, for example, integrating and supporting MOUD and recovery housing, project homes. There's going to be one on developing a measure of MOUD barriers in recovery housing. And there's going to be one on attitudes toward MAT among residents in Oxford houses. There's also going to be several others dealing with special needs in populations. For example, meeting the recovery housing needs of criminal legal system involved individuals. And also other services and residences, for example, MOUD and 12-step groups. So format and topics involve topic-oriented formats. And of course, they're going to be drawing on the expertise of the advisory board and team members. And you're going to, again, as I mentioned, there'll be examples in these three areas: specific types, models, special population, and emergent findings. Next. So these will occur on the third Tuesday of the month, 2 to 3 Eastern Time, 1 to 2 Central Time, 11 to 12 Pacific Time. Next.
Excellent. Thank you, Dustin, for showing us the LMS, because that will be how folks can continue this training series going forward, is through the LMS. And Lenny, thank you so much for talking about the next chapter and what's coming down the road as we close up the training series and segue into the webinar series. So what we want to do now, folks, is to basically hear from you. We're really interested in learning two things from folks at this webinar. The first is we'd like to hear some feedback from you on the training series thus far, and ideas and topics that you'd like to see moving forward in our next chapter. Second, we're hoping that folks will discuss from their perspectives, given that we have a variety of different folks in this all audience webinar, what they think is most needed to support individuals who are taking MOUD as part of the recovery housing. So because we have 30 folks here and we want to give everyone an opportunity to talk, we're actually going to break into 2 different discussion groups, which will be randomly assigned to. I'll facilitate one, Lenny will facilitate the other. We'll have 15 minutes in these breakout rooms, and then we'll come back together and talk as a full group. So if we could break into our discussion. Dustin and Diane, are we all back from our breakout rooms? Okay.
People are still coming back.
Still coming back.
I think most folks should be back.
Excellent. I wish I could have been in both breakout groups. I could only be in one place at one time. So I thought it'd be helpful for us to do just kind of a brief recap so that we can learn what we all talked about. So Lenny, Dr. Jason, you were leading the breakout group 1. Do you want to do a brief recap of the things that you talked about?
Sure. Some of the feedback that came about during our very brief 15 minutes, went very quickly, is that some people kind of stumbled into the webinars fortuitously. The comments ranged from they just soak up the information, they love the material, they learned a lot, very educational, great project. So really people had nothing but favorable comments to make about what was occurring. In terms of things for the future, there was certain discussion about some of the recovery homes are not allowing MOUD people to come in. How do we deal with that? Is an issue that possibly could use some attention. There was a lot of conversations also about peer accountability. And in a sense, how do we get everybody engaged? How do people interact with each other? How do residents hold each other accountable? And Mike Friesinger talked also about conflict that occurs. So these are topics that certainly could be covered in future seminars, but great ideas. I'll turn things back to Amy, and also if there's anything that I missed from our group, let me just kind of give people a chance to make any comments if they want to add to anything I summarized. If not, then I'll turn things over to Amy.
Excellent. Sounds like you had a really fabulous discussion, Lenny. My group was really great too. I have to say it was diverse. So we had both operators and researchers in the group. We had folks who had attended several webinars and folks who were just new to the I-STARR training series. So it was really nice to get these diverse perspectives. So folks who had been part of the training series had good things to say about it, both the provider and the researcher webinar series, informative, liked the speakers and the information provided by the speakers, but some really good suggestions on things to cover moving forward. So for example, with the operator providers, there was good stuff presented, but more hands-on stuff in the next iteration of the webinar series would be helpful. Particularly different kinds of medications. For example, methadone is a trickier medication. Another thing that was brought up was the differences in perspectives and how people learn about and are informed about medications from the operator provider perspective than from the residents. So making sure that residents are also educated and have access to information. So, thinking about how we can pull more residents into the webinar series to learn about MOUD in recovery housing might be helpful. I think those were the big things. I am noticing in the chat that Van Smith from New York dropped in DEI in recovery housing, and what a great suggestion that is. Anything else from my breakout group that I didn't talk about that would be important for other folks to hear? Anything else in hearing what the other group talked about that has gotten you thinking, or you want to expand upon? Definitely feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself. I am scrolling through. Christine North.
Yeah, Amy, in light of the DEI, I would love to hear about how some of the houses manage issues of, for example, people who are non-binary, people who might be transgender. How do you handle that in trying to be non-discriminatory, for example? We would love to be able to accept everyone, except it's a challenge for me to take someone who is considered trans and bring them into a house with someone of the other sex who might be fearful of these individuals. And so even, for example, women and a male who identifies as female, bringing that male in, even though they identify as female, may be very threatening to the women who are in my setting. So how do we manage that? How do other houses manage it? Do they manage it? Are there specific homes that are for just those individuals? And is that then othering them? Discussions around that would be helpful for me.
Great, that's a great idea. Anyone else? So I don't want to cut this off, but in the interest of time.
Amy. I'm sorry, Amy, to interrupt, but Jody has her hand up as well.
Jody, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just quickly want to say, Christine, thank you for that question and comment. I think it's really important because, I used to do DEI, and it's all about inclusivity. But when you're talking about these sort of living arrangements and these treatment, we have to think about what is the safest thing for everyone, even for trans identified people. And the work that I've done, this might not be safe for them. They may not feel comfortable either. So I think these are really good questions. And I know we often think they're such a small population, but, I think that when we sort of broaden what transgender means, what is gender fluidity, and we think about how restrictive these environments can be, it becomes a really important question. And I think that we're just starting to uncover sort of these discussions. So thank you for bringing that point up. I think it's really important.
Excellent. Thank you, Jody. In the interest of time, I hate to cut things off, but I think that we do need to move forward. Just let's go to the next slide. I do want to mention that we have a very exhaustive website, and Dustin was going to give us a brief preview of our website, just to make sure that folks know where to find it, and can show you exactly where all the good stuff is. Dustin, do you want to do a quick jaunt to our I-STARR website?
Of course, let me just share my screen, and I will do my best to be very, very brief. So just to wrap things up, we just wanted to give a quick overview of the I-STARR website and showcase a few different elements and resources available. The website is a repository for all things I-STARR. It provides a detailed overview of the study, project news and updates, how to register for upcoming webinars, tools and resources, information about the pilot projects, pilot studies, ways to contact and interface with the project team, and much, much more. So as you can see on the home page, you'll land and you'll see the 4 main sections: the I-STARR study, about the project, webinars and trainings, and research and tools. We have a great information and present overview of the project, as you can see here. If you go to the About Us, you can learn a lot more about the I-STARR project team, learn more about our amazing advisory board. And also for this section, I wanted to highlight You'll have access to our annual report and our past newsletters, which are released quarterly. Here, I'd like to encourage everyone, if you haven't already, to subscribe to our newsletter. It contains great information about upcoming trainings, resource spotlights, a lot of great other things. And if you scroll all the way down, you can find our widgets to our Facebook and to Twitter. So for the sake of brevity, I'm going to skip right to tools and resources. In this section, you can find a resource list that provides key articles about recovery housing selected by experts in the field. There are two different sections which you can find researcher-specific and provider-specific resources. And if you go down to the bottom, you can find this category where you can learn more about the NIH HEAL initiative and different co-authors projects throughout these links. We also encourage you to contact us with any new resources or suggestions for improvement and how we can improve these lists. You can learn a little bit more about the pilot study. And finally, here is our sign up and contact list. Click here if you want to register for the webinars, learn more about the projects. We will have another plug for our newsletter. And here at the bottom, you can see our contact list. So feel free to ask us any questions you have, give suggestions for improvement, or just send us a note saying hello. We really value your feedback and hope to hear from you. And with that very short demo, I'm going to turn it back over to Amy to close out the webinar.
Excellent. So yes, Google I-STARR, you'll get to our website. And Dustin, thank you for showing us everything that's up there. So here are just some things that are coming up. So we mentioned the webinar in July. One thing that we do in addition to our webinar series at the I-STARR project is to fund pilot studies. So here's information about our pilot study funding listed on this slide. And we actually have one of our current pilot study directors projects represented here, the MOUD I-STARR project. We have Rashmi, who's here from the MOUD I-STARR project, and she's going to tell you very briefly about that project. Rashmi, are you still here?
Yes. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Dr. Miracle. I'll try to keep this as short as possible. But basically, we are a Missouri-based study that we're doing nationally. And basically, we're trying to see what barriers there might be to supporting MOUD in recovery housing. We're trying to see this from the point of view of an operator / house manager / owner, as well as the residents themselves. So I did drop a little blurb a couple of minutes ago in the chat, maybe like half a minute ago, actually. And it does have our study link. We do ask that you do not share this on the internet because we've had some issues with fraud responses, aka like robots filling them out and pretending to be people. If you are an Oxford House president, please feel free to take part in the study as well. We don't want to exclude Oxford houses from this very important conversation. Additionally, we've also, could we go to the next slide real quick? We've also launched an extra incentive. The first 14 houses where 10 or at least 80% of residents in your recovery home fill out the survey will receive a $50 Amazon e-gift card to be put towards their home. We're hoping to sort of do our final push and get some more operators and residents and houses across America represented in our sample. And thank you so much for your time, and hopefully you can fill out the study. And please feel free to contact us at moistar@umsl.edu or via the phone number in the chat. I respond to both of those, so you'll most probably be calling me. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rashmi. And the MOUD I-STARR project is, exactly what we want to be doing and supporting with this training series. So Rachel Winograd is someone who's kind of new in the research world, and we want to be supporting her work. And her project is specifically focused on MOUD and recovery housing, and it's just an amazing project. So please pass on the word about the MOUD I-STARR project. So guys, we are at the top of the hour. I can't believe that we jammed everything into this webinar, given that we got off to a late start. Thank you so much for your patience and for your attendance. And we won't see people next month. because our next webinar is in July. But we hope to see everyone back at our July next chapter of our webinar series. Again, feel free to go to our website, check out the Learning Management series so you can get caught up on the training series webinars. And again, it's wonderful to see folks, and thank you so much for your participation today.